Hi, everyone. Now let's talk about sex. Yes, sex. Freud, back in 1935, shocked the Western world with his claim that man is not even master in his own house, his own mind. This is a very strong statement, is that right? But however, mediators have made similar claims for millennia. They have suggested that the untrained mind is so unruly that the wind is no wilder. Right? Well, you will see that as we discuss meditation, that type of thing, you will see the same claims popping up. Okay, that our internal environment is sometimes quite beyond our own control. So the lack of control underlies considerable psychological suffering and pathology. Right? Indeed, the first response to beginning meditation or beginners in meditation is usually one of shock. Shock at how out of control, fantasy-filled, distracted, and dreamlike one's usual mind state is. Now, it is this important is that try to empty your mind of anything. Let's see if you could keep this emptiness in mind for 1 minute, and you will find it's very difficult without any training. Okay, say meditation. Okay, so you will then realize that how chaotic, how uncontrollable is our mind. Okay, now thought stopping, as I just mentioned, not by suppression, but by deep calm, can clarify awareness, thereby revealing depths of the psychic usually obscured by thought. Just as the depths of a lake are only revealed when surface waves are stilled. Taoism's greatest philosopher, Zhongji, he wrote that if water derives lucidity from stillness, how much more the faculties of the mind? I'll show you that Peter practiced Peter practiced Qi and meditation, and I could attain the kind of stillness. I will describe all that to you. It is amazing, okay? And perhaps some of you wouldn't even believe me, but then, I'm telling you the truth. Well, for Freud, of course, dreams were a royal road to the unconscious. Right? So we will talk about the unconscious mind later on. Now, meditative tradition aim to reduce destructive emotions. They also aim to cultivate positive effects such as joy, love, and compassion. Even to the point where they become non-exclusive and unconditional. Okay, I will discuss that at some point. If you could meditate to the point of you are losing yourself, you and the world, you and the universe are one. All right, let's take a look at the Freudian concept as you see here. Okay? Now, to toward the end of the 19th century, in the aftermath of Charles Darwin's natural selection, it was generally believed that man and animals had much in common. We know now yes, it is true only to a very limited extent. Unfortunately, Nipissing does not offer comparative psychology. Bigger universities, they do. Comparative psychology compare human being with animals. Okay? All right. Now, many psychologists at that time, at the end of the 19th century, they explained behavior by instincts. Okay? Whenever they found new behavior, they coined one new instinct. Right? So instincts or instinct is merely a psychological term. Very little understanding of the psychological process behind instinct or behind the behavior. So Freud came along and provided a more fruitful approach. Okay. Now remember one. After behaviorism, Freud created the second force in psychology. All right. Now let's take a look at here the iceberg analogy between conscious and unconscious behaviors. According to Freud here, the observable behaviors they are like the iceberg exposed. That means iceberg above the water. These are all conscious behaviors, and we are conscious of what we do, what we see, what we hear. Okay, but underneath there is 90% submerged underneath the water. Okay? I mentioned the Titanic hit an iceberg because of a massive amount of the ice beneath the water. So Freud mentioned that we must study the unconscious mind because 90% below consciousness. We are not even aware of it unless someone guides us with those unconscious behaviors that we have. Okay, all right. According to Freud here, behavior is powered by two fundamental drives. Okay? Eros. Eros, basically, it is called sex drive or life instinct. Now, you must remember that according to Freud, everything is sex. Okay, so Eros, it encompasses all strivings for creative synthesis. Okay, one expression of this strive was seen as the urge for sexual union. See, everything is sex, okay, in Freudian theory. All right, the energy to power the eros was called libido, sex drive. Sex drive. Okay, you're right. You hear me right. Sex drive. Okay, because everything is sex. Now, diametrically opposite to eros, it's called thanatos. Thanatos, we call it aggressive drive or the death instinct. Okay, or the death instinct. It included all striving toward self-destruction or breaking down of order breaking down of form, breaking down of regulation. So this is a destructive force. Okay, this is a creative force. All right. So we have what? You see here, we always have what? Have polar opposite. Is that right? And apparently, this one is more positive, far more positive. This one is very negative. All right. Now, no term was suggested for the psychic energy that what? That powers what? That powers what? The metals. Okay. So it is only here libido. I'm sure you are familiar with this term in your first year psychology courses. All right, so take a look at the concepts central to psychoanalysis, and you can derive what? You can derive a lot from this into understanding positive psychology. All right, now Freud accounted for individual differences. That's the different people deal with their fundamental drives in different ways. So to explain these differences, Freud pictured a continuing battle between two parts of the personality, the id and the superego, moderated by a third part, the ego. The ego is the arbitrator. This is what? This is wild, right? This one is what? Very conservative. So let's take a look at the id. The id, it is conceived as the primitive, unconscious part of the personality, the storehouse of the fundamental drives, and of course it operates what? Irrationally. Okay? How irrationally impulses push for expression and gratification, no matter what. No matter what. Here's the crazy thing, right? Without considering whether it is desirable or realistically possible or morally acceptable. So it is characterized by the kind of what you call primary process thinking, in which we engage in our dreams. And during such primary process thinking, the rules of logic and reality do not hold. So in total, the id wants to do what feels good. What feels good. Now, of course, here you remember Piaget in the pre-operational stage. The child is full of fantasy, full of illogical thinking, okay? And but then a lot of time they don't act them out. They only want. I remember children like to have imaginary play, that type of thing, assuming the teddy bear is alive. They talk to the teddy bear, that type of thing. Okay? But this one here, the id here, we are talking about adult personality. Okay? We're talking about adult personality. Diametrically opposite to the id is our superego, according to Freud. It is conceived as the repository of an individual's values, including their moral attitude. Or somehow we like to call it conscience. It develops when children internalize the prohibitions, the rules, of their parents and others against certain kinds of action. You can't do this because you're gonna hurt your brother, right? That type of thing. The superego also includes the quote-unquote ego ideal, which develops as a child internalizes the views of adults, the views of parents, the views of primary caretakers as to the kind of person they should try to become. That superego, the society's representative in the individual, is often in conflict with the it. They fight against one another. So this superego wants to do what is right. This wants to do what feels good, regardless of the consequences, regardless of how crazy it is, regardless of whether it is possible to do that. Would it hurt oneself by doing this? So this one will counter this type of primary process thinking. Now, then the ego. The ego here plays the part of arbitrator, as I just mentioned. Okay? It represents the individual's picture of reality, of what will lead to what, and which things are possible in the world, as it is what actually perceived. So reality is taken into consideration. So part of the ego's job is to choose kinds of action that will gratify its impulses without having undesirable consequences. How to do this? Of course, here, arbitrator, balance, right? So for example, block an impulse to fly by leaping from a cliff. Okay? And of course, substitute that with skydiving. Or take a roller coaster run. A roller coaster. I assume a lot of you have already taken such a ride, right? It fulfills the fantasy of flying off the cliff, or bungee jumping, that type of thing. Now, but when the it and the superego are in conflict, the ego generally tries to find a compromise that will at least partially satisfy both. Okay? Now, in doing so, it may make use of one or a number of what we call unconscious defense mechanism. Right? Defense mechanism. So let's take a look at this defense mechanism. But that overuse of defense mechanism constitutes neurosis. Okay? That's Freud saying that. All right, so let's take a look at what this is called the intrapsychic conflict. All right, intrapsychic conflict, because the ego and superego do not always coexist peacefully. Okay, the it demands immediate satisfaction of drive, while the superego threatens guilt if any pleasurable satisfaction of immoral impulses is attempted. So there is there is intrapsychic conflict here. Okay, intrapsychic conflict. The ego tries to press unacceptable the ego tries to repress unacceptable desires, okay, but it does not always succeed. Okay, now this is suppressed So suppressed and repression. We'll come to that. Okay. Now, the repressed, this is repression. Okay? The repressed materials have energy. So, for example, something is not acceptable. Okay, and the ego will try hard to repress. Now, repress unacceptable desires. What is repression? Okay, repression is something that's not good. So the ego will will push it into unconsciousness, as if nothing bad has happened. Okay. However, doing so, the repressed materials have energy, and this energy tries to return the repressed material to consciousness. So it is like an ice cube, or the iceberg. I tend to say the iceberg that is pushed completely under the surface of water, but then it keeps popping up again. Is that right? Like what? You must have this experience. Like what? Like a forgotten dentist appointment. Like what? You forgot to pay the bill. You forgot to attend your best friend's birthday party. That type of thing. Okay. Repressed material fractions to return. No matter how hard you push it down, push the ice cube down, okay, it threatens to return because it has energy. Because pain is associated with the repressed material, we keep trying to repress it, like as if it has never happened. Okay? Push it into subconsciousness. All right. Now, so you push the ice back underwater. Okay. All right. Now the ego tries to reconcile the conflicting demands of the id and the superego, while at the same time taking into account external reality, with its limited opportunities for drive satisfaction. All right. So let's take a look here. Take a look at the energy hypothesis. I have described the energy involved. Okay, the repressed materials have energy, and we have to exert energy to push it or push them down underwater. So the act of pushing them underwater means what? Under consciousness. It is called repression. Okay, take a look at the energy. Freud understood these phenomena in terms of In terms of his energy hypothesis. Repression of unacceptable thought or impulses requires psychic energy. So that is psychic energy. The force of the impulse that seeks expression must not exceed the repressive force, or repression will fail, and repressed material will pop up, will become conscious. The more energy tied up in such intra-psychic conflict, the less available for dealing with current reality. All right? So there is that tug of war between the defense mechanism of repression, okay, and reality. Is that right? So when we have to spend so much energy into repression, we become exhausted, and at one point we may fail to repress those materials. So they would these materials will pop up and cause a lot of damage to our personality, to our reality, to our what, to our mind. All right, so let's take a look at ego defense mechanisms. How ego, how our what, the ego deal with this. So the ego uses a variety of defense mechanisms that disguise the unacceptable impulse. Right? So let's take a look at what denial. Denial means what? Oh, it has never existed. It's very much like what repression. Okay. All right. So all defense all defense what mechanism begin with repression of unacceptable impulses that is forcing them to be unconscious. Okay, but then what? I mentioned repression ties up energy. So to conserve energy, the ego uses a variety of defense mechanisms that disguise the unacceptable impulse by distorting the source, aim, and or object of the impulse. They avoid the retaliation of the superego, allowing the impulse, in effect, to sneak past the censor, of course, our conscience, the superego. All right. So in this way, the total repression of the impulse is not necessary. Okay, this reduces the energy requirements for repression, analogous to the way that letting steam out of a pressure cooker reduces the force required to hold on the lid. Okay, so that's the scenario of the what the ego is trying to do, so that the it will be partially satisfied, and the superego will not act up. Kind of thing. So denial. No, I never did that. Lying, all that. So it is a primitive defense mechanism in which an individual does not acknowledge some painful or anxiety-provoking aspect of reality or of the self. Let me give you an example. A person may deny that smoking is contributing to his or to her health problems, despite clear medical statements to that effect by a competent medical personnel. So denial involves a major distortion of reality, and therefore is primitive and maladaptive. Now, have you heard of this here? A smoker very concerned about smoking causes cancer, from all the news, all the publication. So at long last, this smoker refuses to watch news, refuses to read, just to justify smoking, that type of thing. Anyway, so that's the very basic. All of us, at some point in time, we have done this, right? And some of us, we do this very often. Okay? All right. So lying is a form of denial. Reaction formation. Oh, this is I like this. Okay? Freud could think of something like this. Okay, in reaction formation, an unacceptable impulse is repressed, and its opposite is developed in exaggerated form. All right. Now, for example, a child who hates a younger sister may repress it and instead feel love for the sister. So you see what the defense can be seen as, I hate my sister. And it becomes, I love her. Eh? Well, so this is one. And also another good example will be, let's say what, a congressman in the United States, he what, lambasted what, oh, homosexuality is the worst human what, human behavior. Eh? And then what, later people found out, wow, this guy is what, is homosexual. So, that kind of thing, all right? That kind of thing. I'm not saying homosexuality is not good, okay? I'm just using this as an example. And this was a real example, okay? Anyway, there are a lot of people like this here, okay? They exaggerate the opposite, all right? Uh, uh, I was thinking of another example. Anyway, in what here, projection, the person, very similar to reaction formation, the person's own unacceptable impulse is instead thought to belong to someone else. Okay, so you see here, let's say a man who is tempted to steal, but whose strong ethical sense, like the superego, will not allow him to even think of stealing. Because it may project his unacceptable in. So the superego will not allow him to even think of stealing, and this person may project his unacceptable impulse onto another person. I want to steal, but because of the superego, then will project to what that person is stealing. Now, take a look at this here. Isn't that true that cultural scapegoats often become projective targets, accused of crimes and immoral acts that are really the accuser's own repressed impulses? So in this way, individual intrapsychic conflict contributes to prejudice. Right? So this is what this is a scapegoat theory, making use of Freudian psychology. All right. The defense mechanism of displacement distorts the object of the drive. So displacement is less primitive than projection because the impulse is correctly seen as belonging to the individual. Only the object is distorted. For example, a child who is angry with the father may not consciously be able to acknowledge the anger because of fear of retaliation and guilt. The aggressive impulse may be disguised by directing it toward a brother. I want to hurt dad. I can't do that. So I want to hurt my sister. All right. I want to hurt my boss, but I will lose my job. So then I want to go home and hurt my wife. That type of thing going on all the time. A husband beating up the wife, right? That type of thing. All right. So this is called displacement. Okay. Identification. Identification is a process of borrowing or merging one's identity with that of someone else. It is part of normal development. Boys identify with their fathers, girls with their mothers, and all of us with cultural heroes, right? It can also be a defense mechanism avoiding the recognition of one's own inadequacies and wishfully adopting someone else's identity instead. Karen Horney, at 1953, she already wrote many papers and she wrote books about what? About this here, especially about what? About women who wanted to identify with the men so that what? She would become more powerful, that type of thing. And she back in the early 50s, she talked about masturbation, that type of thing. Okay, she was well ahead of her time. Okay, and that was she was credited with one of the beginners of women liberation. Okay, women liberation. All right, now identification sometimes functions to overcome feelings of powerlessness. Adopting the identity of someone who has power over us, even if that power is not used for our benefit, is termed identification with the aggressor. For example, children may identify with abusive parents or hostages with their captors, right? And of course, there are many life examples of this here. Uh, a very famous family, very well of, I think it's the Getty family. Getty, his daughter, what was her first name? I can't remember now. Anyway, she was kidnapped by the Red Army. Okay, South America group. Okay, she was captured and held captive for many years, and then later on she was caught trying to rob a bank together with her captors. Then later on, they discovered she was almost totally brainwashed. Okay? She was identified with her captors, saying that they were good to her, they were heroes, that type of thing. It took many years of rehabilitation. Okay, and of course, I think at least one movie on her. Okay, so that is identification with the captors. All right. Emotional insulation or emotional isolation. All right. So here in emotional insulation or emotional isolation, thoughts related to some unpleasant occurrence are disassociated from other thinking, and thus they do not come to mind. So you insulate yourself from those bad thoughts that would arouse anxiety. In addition, emotions that would ordinarily be connected with the thought are also gone. Okay. Now, for example, a person who has lost a loved one through death may isolate their experience, not thinking of the loved one because of the grief it might bring. Okay. Now, emotional isolation. Some people are very good at that. This is also called compartmentalization. Compartmentalization. Okay. For example, uh, a boss in back in the office, the boss is very aggressive, shouting at people and all that. Okay, but then back home, this boss is like a sheep to his wife. Okay, and nothing of that you see in the office. So that means this person could compartmentalize his emotion. Okay, in within certain compartment, this person will behave like this. In a different compartment, say at home, this person will behave totally differently. That is compartmentalization, where a lot of people could do that, with what success. Right? Rationalization involves giving plausible but false reasons for an action to disguise the true motive. For example, a parent might rationalize while spanking a child, saying it will teach the child to be more obedient, though the true motivation may be that the parent resents the child. Take a look at this. That will teach you not to hit people. That type of thing. So, rationalization involves relatively little distortion. So, it is considered a relatively mature defense mechanism. Well, more mature defense mechanism. So, let us take a look. Let us take a look. Intellectualization. Well, here, intellectualization prevents clear, undistorted recognition of an impulse through excessive or distorted explanation. A person who overeats may give many reasons. I need extra vitamins, extra proteins to deal with the stress. Okay, have you done this? I always gain weight in the winter, and so on. So sometimes what intellectualization works like a sour grape attitude. We intellectually convince ourselves that we didn't want what we can't have, right? So that's what intellectualization, right? Now, projection. What is projection? You place what? Placing blame for one's difficulties upon others, or attributing one's own unethical desires to others. Okay, so projection is very similar. Oh, I have projection here, projection, sorry. Oh my goodness, Peter Chow. Okay. All right. Regression. Regression means retreating to earlier development level, involving less mature responses and usually a lower level of aspiration. That is to say, well, you're an adult, or you cannot deal with the situation. You regress to what? To becoming what? A child. Okay. When you are a child, you are forgiven for making such mistakes. All right? Okay. Undoing, you atone for, or you counteract immoral desires or acts. So this is very good, is that right? Now, here it becomes more positive, is that right? It becomes more positive, okay? And of course, finally here, sublimation. Sublimation in Freudian psychology is the most desirable and healthy way of dealing with unacceptable impulses. It occurs when the individual finds a socially acceptable aim, an object for the expression of an unacceptable impulse. See here, that's good. This allows one indirect discharge of the impulse, so that what is the pressure of the pressure cooker is reduced. Sublimation occurs when artists transform primitive urges into works of art. Aggressive impulses may be sublimated into athletic competitiveness. You see here, healthy expression of the id. Okay, now within Freudian theory, this is the most laudatory interpretation that can be made about anyone. Anyone. Now, let's take a look at the creative individuals are particularly interesting models of sublimation. And what they have been of interest to psychoanalysts, beginning with Sigmund Freud. They retain the ability lost by most of us to assess the fantasy world of the id or the unconsciousness. Creative people are capable of what psychoanalysis describes as regression in the surface of the ego, regress into unconsciousness in the surface of the ego. Okay? So therefore what unacceptable impulses could be expressed, okay, without the censorship from the superego. Okay, now research confirms the psychoanalytic hypothesis that creative artists can shift more readily from controlled thinking, that's an ego function, right, to unregulated thought. They are conscious. Okay, that can normal people who are less able to assess the unconscious. However, you should notice that psychotic individuals can have access to the unconscious material too, but they have difficulty turning to controlled thinking, whereas creative people can make the transition in both directions. That is to say, now let's take a look at an artist, normal, and a schizophrenic, okay, also an artist. The normal artist could dive into subconsciousness and deal with the it, or to obtain ideas, to see materials and create art. A lot of times you see, wow, how could this person express this in this way? This is excellent. Now, the artist could go in and out of subconsciousness or unconsciousness. Let's use the word subconsciousness. Can go in and get out at will. That's how the schizophrenic, they can go in, but it's hard for them to get out. Right? They could only do that with Prozac, with medication. Okay, so that's the difference, right? That's the difference. All right, so that's sublimation. Okay? This is one of the healthiest way to deal with whatever the it wants. Is that right? Okay. All right, let's take a look at Freud's psychosexual stages. Children, Freud was here, just like Piaget. He used the method of clinical research. Okay, but then his research methodology is quite different from Piaget. Piaget observed children in natural settings. And Piaget created experiments and watched children. How do they deal with the problems at hand? How do they answer questions? Okay, so that's clinical. That is, of course, clinical observation. Freud, however, he hypnotized his clients and found out repeatedly that major problems of his clients' personal development originated during the first 7 years of life. Remember when I discussed Piaget, I brought forth the concept of Burton White. He emphasized the importance of the first 3 years of life. Freud emphasized the importance of the first 7 years of life, right? So let's take a look. Freud discovered that he could understand the other personality only by examining the kind of experiences and personal relationships the other had in childhood before entering school. All right. Wow. Before entering school. So there's a famous phrase here coined of what Freud is: the child is the father of the man. You hear me right? The child is the father of the man. All right. So Freud found that during the first few years of life, children, they go through a sequence of emotional stages. Cognitive, Piaget's cognitive, Freud emotional stages. Each stage is dominated by instinctual, unlearned biological origins, which are hedonistic in nature, tied in with pleasure. Okay, tied in with pleasure. So you see here, because of Freud, said we should observe the child, learn from the child, and we would be able to deduce the other personality, and hence the birth of developmental psychology. Good. Eh? All right. Excuse me. So, Freud here, each stage is dominated by instinctual here. So what? The first few years of life, children go through a sequence of emotional stages. That's like what Piaget's cognitive stages. Each stage is dominated by instinctual, unlearned biological urgings, which are hedonistic in nature. Okay? So, for example, I will talk about this example later on. Okay. Now, first, the oral stage, from birth to 18 months, 1.5 years old. So this one coincides with Piaget's sensory motor. Okay, the quality of nurturing children receive, especially those related to feelings, will maximally affect their future feelings of development and trust in the world. You see here, the Piaget stresses sensory motor, is that right? The whole world connected to our senses. Here, for Freud, the mouth region is the primary source of nourishment, stimulation, and contact with the environment. Okay, so true. Remember Piaget observed the child we have also observed, say, the non-nutritive sucking of thumb, sometimes even the toes. Is that right? I actually watched my own child, my own children. I have two boys. Okay, observe them sucking on their toes, and it was really a joy to watch them do that. Okay, as you grow older, you lose the flexibility of your body. I doubt that any one of you could suck your own toes. I cannot finish out. It's too old to do that. Okay, I can't do that. Okay, I can't do that. You may ask Peter, what if I force you? You will have to do it. No, 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 no. I'm too rigid now. I'm too rigid now. Okay. My my old frame does not allow me to do this. You are still flexible. I'm pretty sure quite a good number of you could do that, right? So do it. Explore with your mouth. Okay. And remember, Piaget mentioned that the child learns from what? Sucking. Okay? The child learns from sucking. Now, at that time, the child is what? And also Freud observed the child is not very good with the hands. Now, remember, our development here, we start from our central axis. If you stand, like, think of we standing up from the central meridian outward, we could what? We could rotate our body, the trunk. Okay, but then what? Say, look at the hands, our fingers, for example, fingers. You see what? During the sensory motor or during the oral stage, babies are not very good in manipulating the fingers. Is that right? You observe that a lot of time when babies, during this period, babies try to reach out for something. Let's say the milk bottle. They always want knock it down. Right? So it's not wise to give them a glass of water. They're likely to knock it down. Okay, it is not their intention; it is their inability to do that. Now, as they grow older, you could see they could master their fingers individually a lot easier. A lot easier. So that is because of what? Development. Okay, we develop from the central meridian outward. For the fingers, the movements, controlled movements of our fingers would come very late. Okay, so that's the what? The oral stage. Okay, oral stage. That is also Piaget's sensory motor, so very similar. Right? Very similar. So here, Freud is concerned with one nurturing, okay, or the nutrition receiving, okay. And of course, here those related to feeling, how babies are fed, how they are how they are held, how they are embraced, how they are loved, will maximally affect the future feelings of what development and trust in the world. Now, this is important, trust. And you will see that what Erik Erikson, he followed the Freudian psychology quite a bit, and you will see that his notion of trust versus mistrust at the very beginning. It is very important. Trust here. All right. The second stage, the anode stage, 1.5 to 3 years. Okay, so here, independence and control are stressed. Okay, so that means what? The child focalizes or focuses on gratification first, on elimination of feces, then later in retention of the. Okay, so first in getting rid of them, and then later in retention. All right, now it has been postulated that messy personality is a result of what? Is a result of messy toilet training. Okay, do you believe in this? We know that I've been a parent, okay, and we know that there are development due mainly to phylogenetic. That is like walking. Remember I mentioned walking. You cannot force the child to walk or teach a child how to walk. No. Walking will come automatically. It is a big thing. Walking is a big thing. And you realize, as I also mentioned before, after walking becomes what? Becomes what? Uh, Something that a child could do easily. The next one, the next the next thing is explosive acquisition of language. Remember that? Okay? So we see what the stage theory makes a lot of sense if we look at it from this perspective. Right? So the what I don't say now it is phylogenetic that is to say what you don't have to force the child to do that. It's not good. And then what personality theorists have mentioned that if you force the child to do that, it will have what? It will have what? Impact, negative impact on the child's what? Development, okay? And on the child's what? Child uh, personality. So from the personality later on, okay? I still remember my elder boy. We never forced him to use the toilet, but then one day he grabbed the one, the portable toilet, and he he hid underneath the table to do what? To mind his business. That it seemed to me that the child is associating that with perhaps guilt, trying to hide themselves from 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 public observation, that type of thing. Okay, it is really something to watch. Okay, it comes without we having to encourage or that type of thing. So I think it is phylogenetic. Okay, all right. From 3 to 7 years, this is called the phallic stage. Sexual identity is the major aspect of personality formation here. Right? So sexual identity. So you see, this is called psychosexual. Is that right? Did I put it down? Yeah, psychosexual stages. So this is the third stage from 3 to 7. 3 to 7. Remember Piaget? Piaget 0 to 2 sensory motor, 2 to 7 pre-operational. The child is full of fantasy. The child is illogical. Okay, the child likes bathroom language, that type of thing. The child is crazy, in a positive sense, mind you, in a positive sense. But then for Freud here, sexual identity is the major aspect of personality development. All right, so according to Freud, this stage centers around erotic exploration and stimulation of one's own body, especially, of course, the genital area. All right, so this is one here, and that's why I call it sexual or psychosexual development. Okay, everything is sex. Okay, now, here, Freud suggested that after this, a period of latency, say from 7 to 12 years, that is Piaget's concrete operational stage 7-11, remember? 7 to 12 years, a period of latency follows, in which the oral, anal, and phallic dimensions are integrated and no new elements are added. However, during adolescence, okay, this is called, Freud called it the genital stage. Okay, adolescent, the genital stage. All the previous elements, oral, anal, and especially the phallic, they are brought back into play and reworked into an adult personality. All right? So here Freud had was 3 stages. But then stage four is what? 7 to 12, like Piaget's concrete operation. No, here this is called the genital age. Okay, and all these three stages will be brought together. Okay, and that one and reworked into an adult personality, an adult what character. All right. Now, Freud's contribution is to establish that extremely significant personal and emotional aspects of our development are determined during the first 7 years of our life. And remember Burton White, our intellectual development was formed during the first 3 years of life. And Benjamin Bloom, he put forward the learning curve. Okay, he identified the following: the first 5 years of our life are the most important because what? Because 2/3, 66% of our cognitive ability, of our cognitive or pro abilities are formed by the time we are 5 years old. Now, all of this here, as you will also see later on here, the first few years of our life are very, very important. Why? Because what? The growth curve, regardless of what physical growth, IQ, intellectual growth, and emotional growth, okay? The curve is very, very steep. When the curve is very steep, it indicates what? It indicates that what? That we want everything will tend to affect what the development, right? It is very what steep, and therefore what the development is fast, okay, very fast. So we don't want we don't want to miss anything there, is that right? We don't want to miss anything, and we will have to pay attention to what? To the development. We cannot say, oh, let's what? Let it grow. Okay? No. We will have to understand developmental psychology. At this point, we will have to understand what? Cognitive growth. We will have to understand what? The psychosexual growth. And then, of course, later on, we will talk about what? We'll talk about the lifespan psychology by Erik Erikson. Then what? Then with Erik Erikson's theory, from beginning to what? Very old age, we begin to have an idea of what? How we grow. Okay? And what? Certainly, we will have to with all this knowledge, we'll be able to to say a lot about what positive psychology. Okay, good. So this is about psychosexual development. Good. Okay, and this is it. Thank you.